Hello, I'm John Smith. I'm the CTO of LiveAction. I'm going to be going over the challenges of our customers that we help solve with our product. So I just want to talk a little bit about how we got started, because I think that'll kind of explain why the tool came about and why it looks the way it does. So during the government research, we work with agencies like the Office of Naval Research. We work with the Marines, the Navy, the Army, DARPA, Department of Energy. And we researched areas in terms of like quality of service, network management, visualization, large-scale time series databases, ontologies, and cybersecurity. So it's kind of great when you do government research because it's kind of open-ended and you can do a lot of interesting things. So we got started doing QoS on these marine vehicles. So believe it or not, on these Humvees, they have an RSR G1 back in the day. And they use that for communication. So it's an early entry vehicle. When you're in battle, you bring these guys out and they do communications satellite back to the ship or to their headquarters. So what the project is how to do QoS on these vehicles for the Marines. So one of the things we did was, on the contract, we wanted to learn more about Cisco QoS. So we went to Cisco Networkers. This is back in 2006. I'm not sure why they changed the name to Cisco Live. I kind of like Cisco Networkers, but this is kind of what it looked like. And we met Tim Cisgetti. Everybody, I think I know Tim Cisgetti. He's actually helped us quite a bit on how to do QoS and what kind of templates. Actually, we were at Cisco Milan the other day, and I just ran into him on the street. And it's kind of interesting that we keep running into Tim. And Tim wrote the book End-to-End QoS. It's a very massive body of work on how to do QoS on the enterprise, WAN, campus, and trying to absorb all that information is somewhat difficult. But in 2006, when we went to the QoS class, it kind of looked like this. There were like hundreds of people that wanted to do quality of service, and we went through the class. And during the session, you learn about, you're going to have to learn that QoS command reference manual. You're going to have to learn the config guide. You're going to have to read all these other books, and you got to do training and tutorials. So, these are some of the comments that I heard during the conference, right? QoS is way too complex. Cisco CLI tools are not user-friendly. And if you fully understand all this, you're a rocket scientist. So, we're thinking, I don't think the Marines are going to be able to figure this out when they're in battle, and they're not going to have time to crack open that Cisco manual. So sure enough, I go back in the lab, I work at Spirent, so I do a lot of testing. My job at Spirent was breaking routers and switches. So I tried this out, and it really depends, where you're applying QoS. Is it iOS or CatOS? Remember when there was CatOS? And routers or switches, is it distributed? So I go through the whole list, and it's like, wow, holy crap, I don't think they're going to be able to figure this out. So, our intention wasn't actually to build the tool. We were actually trying to figure out how to do QoS for the Marines, and it kind of dawned on us that we probably have to build a tool for them. So that's kind of how our tool started. So, out in the battlefield, the Marines are expected to be a rifleman first and a network engineer second. So they needed, simple tools that'll get the job done for them. And that's kind of how we started on that QoS contract. And the first proof that this product actually worked was actually in this exercise called RSONI. So I spent 2 weeks in the middle of winter in South Korea. And RSONI is kind of interesting. It's an exercise where we pretend like the North Koreans attack South Korea, and you're supposed to come in there with backup and restore and actually provide backup. So I was there for about 2 weeks in this bunker in the middle of South Korea, and they were doing a lot of these operations. They were doing enterprise services over T1. They were trying to do collaboration, and it just wasn't working. So we used the tool, we got QoS implemented, and we got the collaboration tools working. So we kind of realized that, with the tool, we can do a lot that they weren't able to do before. And it's a lot of challenges in implementing QoS on the military networks. And I have a slide that goes over all the differences, but they have encryption, they have security restrictions, and they don't have the luxury of just putting in a packet tier or a riverbed box, just to dump it in there. Every box you put in there is a liability for them. So the second exercise we worked on is called Talisman Saber. So we're working with the Marines, and they're doing joint operations with Australia. And they have this limited bandwidth going from Hawaii back to Australia. They're working over a secret backbone, for example. And we help with the quality of service aspect of it. But the interesting thing about this was I was working with a staff sergeant here. He probably was in his 20s. And I give him about 30 minutes of training on the tool. And I come back the next day. And I go back in the knock, and the staff sergeant's yelling at people. I'm going, why are you yelling at people? And he's telling me, the corporal downstairs in the server room is doing a backup. It's blowing up the backbone that's going back to Australia. I said, how do you know that? And he actually showed me the tool, and he had it laid out perfectly. He must have spent hours on this, laying out every single server and showing me all the flows. So he was like really manning that network and really understood what was going on. So I think at this point we realized that with 30 minutes of training, a 22-year-old staff sergeant really understood his network, whereas before he never could have. So we kind of realized that we're onto something in terms of like being able to visualize and give situational awareness. And then the third thing we did was Navy fleet monitoring. So, we deployed this on the PAC fleet side and on the Atlantic fleet side, but we're able to monitor all the traffic that's going out to these battle groups. And there's thousands of people on these aircraft carriers and on these ships. And we're able to monitor it at scale. So we kind of realized that we can do quality of service. We were actually doing quality of service as well to manage what was going out to the ships. We could do it at scale, and we could give them situational awareness. So it was actually interesting. And one thing that we realized when we monitored this was one of the things that sucked up all the bandwidth to the carriers were actually Xbox game patches. So believe it or not, they have a lot of time sometimes between exercises, and the kids actually do a lot of Xbox. Okay, so that's where we got started in the military. And the military, when they talk about network and comms, they have a different meaning for the military. It's not really about business and money. It's more about mission and lives. So they take their stuff pretty seriously. But to me, they have a very challenging job because their mission priorities change on an instant. Like we're working with MAR4 PAC, which is the Marines in the Pacific, and they had that tsunami. And the next day they had to bug out and do humanitarian assistance and disaster recovery, so they have to pin up all their networks. So on a dime, they have to go out and do network management in a strange place with limited infrastructure. But the second challenge that they have is like joint operations in multiple enclaves. So it's when they go out there, it's not just U.S. forces. They have to work with the UK, Canadian, New Zealand, and everything has to be encrypted. So you see type 1 encryption, HAPIs, and KIVs all over the place. So just imagine doing network management where everything is multiple layers of encryption. And tons of MTU issues, by the way, too. And the next aspect is distributed operations. So they have SATCOMs, radios, SecNet, EPLARs, you name it. So they have to bring all these different technologies to get end-to-end communications. And it's over disadvantaged tactical links. So the bandwidth's limited, the link quality is bad, and interference is always really bad on the antennas. But beyond that, there's people jamming your networks. It's like, it's bad enough, you got people jamming your networks. And then the staffing and training. So Marines do a good job of training their network engineers, and they have contractors, but you're not gonna find a CCIE out in the field. So you gotta build tools that can help them as much as we can. And then there's the security and accreditation issue. So this is the environment that the tool kind of grew up in. So the origins of LiveAction is we weren't actually trying to build a tool. We were actually trying to do quality of service. But we kind of realized there's frustration across the board with management tools that don't actually manage. It doesn't actually fix things. It doesn't know how to actually go into the routers to make changes. And the second thing is reading through all these Cisco manuals. It's yeah, it's great, but I don't want to crack open that 400-page manual every time I want to do something. And trying to deploy CLI is great, but if you try to do it on end devices, it gets a little bit hard. And one of the things is when we're doing operations, you have to make the change, but you kind of need to know right away if it worked or not. And on the Navy side, when they got congestion and you have to make changes or the mission changes, you have to do it right away. So we built a lot of capabilities where it's more real-time than other tools were. But in general, it's answering questions like, what does my network topology and traffic look like? Just even simple things, what path did my network take? what does my load balancing look like? What is the state of QoS? So there was like a bunch of questions like this that we wanted our tools to be able to answer. So on the commercial side, we applied what we did, and the first major portion was QoS monitoring and configuration. So we spent a lot of time on QoS, and I don't know if any of you have seen the CBQoS MIB and tried to dissect it, but once you start doing hierarchical QoS, that thing is like a bear. And trying to gather all that information out of the MIB is kind of a challenge. And early on, Cisco had some issues where if you set up a policy or remove the policy, all the SNMP IDs would change on you. So we went through that, and we built all those kind of capabilities in the tool so that it knows how to handle those situations. Also, analyzing layer 2 QoS, and I can show you that in the demo as well. But monitoring and alerting on voice video quality, whether it's the priority queue or class-based weighted fair queue. But it's great that you understand what's going on with QoS, but really, how do you actually set that up? So having full MQC support, and we have really easy ways to do hierarchical QoS, and I'll actually demonstrate that. And our customers use that a lot as well. And NBAR2 groups for matches. And we have capabilities to audit your QoS, so templates. So this is our primarily, where we got started. So we spent a lot of time on the QoS piece. The other pieces that we work on is like application performance optimization. So, Cisco came out with things like AVC and MediaNet, and that kind of ties in with what we can do on the QoS side. So as we get alerting on application performance, we can use that information, look at where the problem is, and use QoS to actually control and fix using NBAR2 classification, for example. And with application visibility and control, we see more and more customers using Cisco and LiveAction in place of like hardware pros and packet-based approaches. And I'm not saying that NetFlow is a replacement for packet-based approaches, because it's not. Because when you do security, or if you're doing deep application troubleshooting, you're going to need packet. But a lot of our customers are saying that for the majority of things that they need, flow is good enough. And we point at these different dimensions as like price and deployment. So there is no hardware to deploy if you already have a Cisco box, because you could do AVC and MediaNet. And in terms of application performance visibility, Cisco built in like AVC, MediaNet, and NBAR2. And then visibility into the devices and policies are important in that if you monitor outside the box and you have a problem, that's great, but typically when you fix it, it's really in the box, and it's usually something related to congestion, or you're just utilizing that link. So at the end of the day, you're probably going to do something on that device, monitor that device, and actually fix things that you can in terms of like quality of service or whatever that is. Another thing that we've been working on is solutions like IWAN. So now, I don't want to sound like I'm a Cisco salesperson, but we really do see this need for our customers that are asking for this. So one of the things is IWAN, where they want choices between managed services or service provider networks versus regular internet. And it provides like 4 capabilities in terms of being able to choose the right path for the type of traffic that you want to send, but leveraging commodity internet or more expensive MPLS services. So in terms of our tool, we help you with the quality of service aspect of that. We also help you with the PFR visualization and understanding which path it's taking. And then we can leverage AVC to understand what applications are actually running on that. And there's also a security component as well. So we're trying to build tools around solutions that customers are asking for. Yeah, sure.
So to give us an idea, who would your competitors target?
That's a good question. On IWAN, it's kind of a joint solution with Cisco and us, but you would see products like Ipanema. You see like a managed WAN like Ariaka, Talari, Riverbed to some extent, but they do the WAN optimization, but they don't do the path selection portion as far as I know.
Okay.
So on the Cisco Intelligent Path Control, it's really about PFR, and PFR has been around a long time. It was called OER before, but We do the visualization so that as paths change, we can actually show you that. We can alert you when there's out of policies and reports. But we're working with Cisco very closely with the PFR team to do more management of that in the future. So that's a little bit about the challenge portion. Any questions so far?
Quash is a nightmare. Any way you look at it. It's not a great technology, so automating it with templates and tools makes it.
Right.
Just to cover again, what I think I heard correctly here is I see you're pulling in information from NetFlow, JFlow, wherever else, but on the QoS configuration side, I'm correctly reading that it's just Cisco? Or did I mistake the slide earlier that?
Yeah, everything related to configuring, we primarily Cisco, because our CLI API is built for Cisco infrastructure.
Is that something you see changing in the future? I'm looking from a service provider view where, half the service providers have a Juniper backbone, for example, and how they could plug this in. I'm not sure where you're developing going forward, so I'm curious.
Right. I have a slide later on that'll talk more about the control layer, but we see ourselves being more abstracting policies. And I think SDN actually gives us an opportunity where we don't have to build our own CLI API anymore. We can just use northbound APIs. So we want to be multi-vendor, but we want to go higher up in the stack, be an application, understand business level policies and business priorities, and then be able to deploy that as policy. So maybe starting off with quality of service first, but we kind of want SDN to mature, because I'll show in the slide, but you guys already know there's just so many controllers, and which northbound API? Is it Open Daylight? I just saw HP VAN, so.
So I had another question. Does it look at all aspects of QoS? For example, recently had an issue where I had a broken trust boundary. My trust boundary wasn't where I thought it was, or we didn't have it properly configured. So in the middle of the network, we're trusting cost, which is reset on the other side of the link to 0.
Right.
And our packets are going in with one DSCP value, coming out the other side of the network with a different DSCP value of 0.
Yeah, so we would actually be able to catch that. So we have an audit feature, and going through all these sessions, we built those rules into the audit. We actually had a CCIE on staff, so we would ask him, what would be the rules that you would use? So it would actually pick up things like, the trust, MLS trust on the Catalyst switches, for example, if it's set or not. And through the flow visualization, you'll actually be able to see like the DSCP markings change or not.